Welcome to the Landmark Theater's Q&A podcast. In this podcast, you will hear a discussion with writer-director Marc Abraham from the film I Saw the Light, moderated by Variety's Jenelle Riley, recorded at the Landmark West LA.
I thank each and every one of you for being here. In fact, I'm calling your families later and thanking them too.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and congratulations on a great movie. I'm curious,
Thank you.
Have you always been a Hank Williams fan, or was it just a story that spoke to you?
I was always a country music fan. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, and that's 3 hours north of Nashville, and I just, as a kid, listened to a lot of country music. Obviously, Hank preceded me. I mean, hopefully, obviously, Hank preceded me. So it was, George Jones and then Chris Christopherson and then Willie and those guys. And, when you're interested in those guys, eventually you're going to hear about Hank. And then I loved Hank's music. I always loved it. And then when I read a lot about the story, I just thought it was just, I love sad stories. I wanted to start a record label once called Sad Songs You Can't Get Sadder Than This. I think evocative, emotional stories, are powerful. And his story, it just always touched me. He was so young.
And for how long have you been wanting to bring his story to the screen?
I would say, well, let's put it this way. You have selective memory when you remember, like, how long you've been married, how old you are. But I would say that about 7 or 8 years ago I started. By the way, great version of Jambalaya underneath me. I wish I could sing it, but. About 7 years ago, we started working on it, and then 3.5, 4 years ago, I first met Tom.
Mm. And he actually, it's so interesting because for those of you who don't know, I'm assuming everyone does, but maybe you don't, Tom is a British actor playing Hank Williams, yeah. And he's amazing, but he's not the first or even the third person you would think of to play Hank.
I didn't even know who he was when the thing is, he's become a huge star because he's in the Avengers and he plays Loki, and and I have sons who, they rather see Loki, but when I first met him, I didn't know that. And he obviously, I think you know this because he sings all that music. And all those tracks are our tracks. They aren't tracks that we took from Hank. We recreated all those tracks with a great country artist named Rodney Crowell, who lives in Nashville. Brilliant guy. And Tom lived with Rodney for about almost 2 months in his house. I wouldn't even do that, live in somebody's house. I said, man, you can stay in a hotel, drive out there. He said, no, I'm going to get into it. He's a double first in English, classics major at Cambridge. He speaks like, David Cameron or somebody, normally. And, I saw him in Warhorse, and I just thought he looked a lot like Hank.
Really?
And because of that, I was really interested in him, and I thought he was really dynamic in that movie. And so I called his agent, and I did a bunch of research, and he was doing Henry V for the BBC, and then from that he went on to do some other things. And I asked him to send him the script, and he loved the script, and we started Skyping, and that was almost 4 years. Tom says it was 4 years ago. Neither the Avengers or Thor or any of that stuff came out. And like my friends would say to me, because I met all the young actors whose names you would know, almost everybody for the part, because it's a good part, and they were all interested in it. And I told a couple friends of mine that I was hiring this guy named Tom Hiddleston. And literally, the first thing they all said to me is, who's Tom Hiddleston? And then about 8 months later or 7 months later, Thor comes out. And then it's like, well, why are you hiring Tom Hiddleston? And then about 6 months later, or the Avengers or whatever time that was comes out, and everybody's like, hey, man, how did you get Tom Hiddleston? That's legit. That's how it was. It's so funny.
But
great guy.
Did you know there's a film critic for Time Out named Tom Huddleston?
Yes, I did.
Yes, and it gave me such a thrill to see him raving about the movie, and it was like, Tom Hiddleston is genius, Tom Huddleston.
Yeah, maybe I should write my own reviews. Just change one letter.
Right.
Yeah, no, I did know that.
Was Tom at all concerned that he could pull it off himself?
my experience with actors, really good actors, not people desperate, like all of us. I mean, who's not desperate in some part of their lives for something? But I mean, a guy that's getting offers or a woman who's getting offers. I really trust their instincts a lot. And, he had concerns, and he said to me, "Do you think I can do this?" And the first two things I said to him, "You will never sound like Hank Williams exactly. Never. So you could take that off the table." I said, "I just don't like it when people lip sync in the movies." I'm not saying it's a bad thing. There have been good movies where people have done it, but for me, it takes me out of the picture. So I kind of said, if you're close enough to embody the character and give the audience a visceral experience, that's what we're shooting for. You'll never. I mean, I could hear one note and know it's not Hank Williams because I know his music so well. So I took that off the table for him. But he said, "Look, get me somebody who knows more about music than you do to tell me I can do it." And he was shooting a movie called Crimson Peak in Toronto, and I took Rodney up to Toronto, and then we spent about 9 hours in a hotel room in Toronto on a Saturday afternoon. And at the end of it, Rodney's one of these guys, very bright guy. He's if he was married to Roseanne Cash, so his stepdad was Johnny Cash. So, he knows a little bit about the thing. And he wouldn't bullshit it. Kids in here, I don't know. It's an R-rated movie. You shouldn't be in here if it is. But he wouldn't bull anybody about it. And he said, at the end of it, Tom said, "Do you think I can do it?" And Rodney said, and he's really laconic. And he was like, "Yeah, I think you can." And Tom's waiting because, actors, they're waiting for "No, I was really shocked how good you are. And, man, you really can pull it off. And, gosh, you're great." And Rodney was like, "Yeah, probably." And I said to Tom, "Dude, I think that's all you're going to get."
Yeah. Tom also told me, I think it was at the end of the shoot, he asked Rodney, he's like, "Why did I think I could do this?" And you know what Rodney said?
What did he say?
I can't do the Rodney voice, but it was, It was "'cause you got more guts than brains, Tommy."
Yeah. That's probably true. I just got off an airplane about it. I didn't even know I was going to make it because the airplane was delayed. That's a shock, isn't it? And we had a premiere last night in New York, and I didn't watch the movie. Neither Tom or I did. We went to dinner, and I was just thinking about Tom's is a really good mimic. I mean, he can do, and he does an imitation of me, and he was imitating me at dinner the whole time, and
to your face.
Oh yeah, of course. He kept saying I would come up to him, and because all actors want to do another take. Just because they're, why wouldn't they want to do another take? But I don't like doing a lot of takes. The most takes I did in the whole movie was 11 takes in the whole film. Also, it's an independent film, so we didn't have, I couldn't afford the time. He was imitating me last night in the restaurant. He's going, I'd come up and go, "Dude, these people out here want to go home. We got to move on." But he's really good at doing me, and it's funny. And the producer, the distributor from Sony Classic was just howling. But he's a good mimic.
You mentioned this is an independent movie, which people might not know because it is so beautiful. It's a period piece with great costumes. And I suspect it looks a lot more expensive than it was.
I think it definitely looks more expensive than it is. I mean, we spent about $12.5 million, which is nothing to say isn't a lot of money. But we had 54 locations. We shot 130 scenes. The thing is, the way you get it to look like that is Dante Spinotti, who's the cinematographer, is one of the world's class cinematographers. He shot most of Michael Mann's movies like The Insider and Heat and movies I love, and Last of the Mohicans. And Meredith Boswell, the production designer, has been nominated, and Alice Baker did the 12 Years a Slave. She was our set decorator, and the guys carrying the cameras were first rate. So I had a great crew of people. I mean, it's such a gigantic collaboration. I always give a speech at the beginning of a movie, and I to sort of say to everybody, "Look, we're in this together. If you got a beef, it's okay, but if you have a beef with somebody, don't carry it around. I don't want to see you know, and because I'm very sensitive to that stuff. And I said, and if you think you're really important, if you think you're more important, if I think I'm more important, I promise you on a period piece like this, there will come a moment when the most important person of all the people here is the guy that can get a 49 Ford to start. And that's the truth, because you can have 150, 200 people sitting around waiting on that. And so, you know, it takes, it's a, you know, it's not a trope, it's a truth. It takes a lot of really incredible people working together.
And I want to talk about this amazing ensemble you put together, because I'm a big fan of Elizabeth Olsen's as well.
How good is she in the movie?
She's
I mean,
so
she's
great.
just amazing to me in the movie.
And she has to do something that I think is really, really hard, which is perform badly.
Yeah.
which is actually one of the hardest things to pull off and not go over the top and be
Yeah, you
comical.
mean in terms of her singing?
Yes.
Well, she gets mad at me when I say she has a good voice. Lizzie's a very understated person. She's just really understated, and she never brags about anything. And in fact, she goes the other way, and she means it. You know, she really strives to be. And I think she's got a beautiful. I can't sing at all, so to me, anybody who can carry a tune is really good. But she's got a beautiful voice, and the question was like, can you sing bad enough that we know you're not very good, but good enough that you don't make your husband seem like an idiot for allowing you to sing? So that was where she had the balance. But what I loved about Elizabeth's performance is that character, and Audrey got a lot of detractors. And I mean, if you read about Audrey Mae Shepherd, Audrey Williams, you'll find a lot of people who did not like her. And particularly women in those days, if they were tough and pushy, I mean, look how it is right now. You know, we got to deal with that still. We're just still dealing with it. So she was really, you know, she was like Yoko Ono to people. And what happened, what I loved about what she did is that she could have been such a shrew, but she has such a natural intelligence that when I watch the movie and watch her and I get caught up in her, I think she is tough and she can be kind of bitchy, but there's a part of her that says, you think it's easy being married to this guy? Mm-hmm. She really kind of conveys that. That's real, to me, skillful.
And I'm curious, when you're doing a movie that's, you know, based on real people and real events, how beholden are you to the absolute truth? How much creative license are you comfortable taking?
This film is as authentic in terms of what actually happened as you could possibly be. There isn't one thing. I mean, of course, there's dialogue, which I had to create. But I did it based upon tremendous amounts of research. But in terms of the events that take place in this movie and the relationship between them, because I never really wanted to make a classic biopic. I don't even like the word. I didn't want to start when he was a young boy. I could have. He was taught how to play the guitar by an African-American guy named T. Tot. And you start, but to me that was, there's a little bit of like trying to psychoanalyze a genius. Mm-hmm. And you're saying, well, the reason he's like this is because of this. And I just never cared for doing that. But where I started was just my choice. I wanted to start. I didn't want to explain any of that. And I also didn't want to show him writing songs, because I said to the producers, and they said, "Well, do you think we should do that?" I said, "Let me tell you something. Audiences are smart. They're going to get that what I'm trying to say. I mean, they may not like it, but they're going to get that the songs and the power often come from relationships, and it's whether it's Keats or Shelley or Bob Dylan about, you know, writing Tangled Up in Blue. Those songs, we don't have to wonder why Bob Dylan wrote Tangled Up in Blue, you know, and so I wanted to show the personal side of it. All that's true. And when Holly, so Hank Williams Jr. is the little boy, and his daughter, Holly, is about 30-something now, and she's a very good singer herself and a very good songwriter, and married a guy named Kings of Leon, sophisticated, interesting woman, and she was very supportive of what we did. And when she saw the movie, I couldn't even sit in the room with her because she was in it. And then Jet Williams, who's about 60-something, I'll explain. The scene on the pier, the woman on the pier ended up having that child. That child that Hank took responsibility for was born 4 days after he died. For 27 years, that little girl never knew she was Hank Williams' daughter. Then she married a lawyer, and he found out.
Wow.
That's the truth. And then, so Jet had a really hard life, being passed around a lot, and then find out you're Hank Williams' daughter. And then Jet and Holly watched the movie together down in Nashville. And I started watching, and I couldn't handle it. I started getting sweaty. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm sitting here with Jet and Holly and granddaughter and the daughter, and I left, and I took, and there was a tennis match on. It was during the summer or during the fall, and I went and got a drink in a bar, and I was just like, okay, I need a cocktail. And when I went back, Holly came up to me afterwards. I waited. I didn't ask, what do you think? I was just hoping they weren't going to walk out and get in their car, and I hear tires peeling. And she came up and she said, Mark, I love the movie. She said, not everybody feels, everybody's going to have a different opinion, and everybody wants to see different things. But we have a really messed up family, and we've been messed up a long time, and I think you treated everybody fairly. And what else could I ask for? I mean,
That's the greatest review of all time.
For me and Tom, and she wrote Tom. She's a very good writer. She wrote Tom. Tom has the email she wrote him and printed it up and kept it because it just touched him so much. She said, I think the last thing she said, I couldn't help but feeling it by the time the thing was over, I felt like I'd seen a ghost. Hard to imagine, seeing your granddad like that. Tough.
I mean, because he did have this sort of larger-than-life life, was there anything that you wanted to include in the movie, but it just didn't fit for whatever reason?
Well, there are some. When you go out and buy the DVD, no, you don't have to do that. The fact that you came tonight is good enough. But there were some scenes I took out of the film because it just got very. It's a balance. As a filmmaker, you get caught up in it, and it's like look at pictures of your kids. You think, hey, aren't my kids great looking? Look at my kids. Other people, yeah, great, that's great. But so you do have to sort of, as that old saying, kill your darlings. And so I took some things out. I'll say something I've never said before that I'm mad about at myself. There's in the scene in the kitchen in the beginning of the film when she's in there and he says to her, she said, so what do you think? And he said, it's fine. And then she goes, well, if it's fine, it doesn't need any ketchup. He says, do you mean the song or the food? And he said, well, they both need a little ketchup. Well, in the middle of that scene, I had a guy come walking in, and he was a boarder. That was a boarding house. And I had the boarder come in, and I called him Raymond Wallingford. And it was nothing. I should have kept it in because it really made it clear when you see the next scene with the girl on the porch that it's a boarding house. And every time I look at it, I'm mad at myself. But he walked in, and he says, are you Miss Lily? And Audrey looks over and goes, do I look like his mother? And he goes, no, you don't. And then he walks out. And it was nothing. And for some reason, you start trimming frames, and the studio's saying, can you get it shorter? We get more playtime. And, you just, and every time I see it.
Yeah. You're still editing in your
I
mind.
just go, yeah, why did I take out Raymond Wallingford? The poor guy didn't do anything to me.
Where'd you find Lily? I thought I saw a ghost on the screen.
Yeah. Well, she happens to be one of the greatest American theater actresses that we have. Maybe the best, but you can't recognize her. It's Cherry Jones. She's won 2 Tonys. When you see her in real life, you can't believe she's such a good-looking woman, too. I mean, really, she's got beautiful gray hair, and it's really short and cool. But she's so, without any vanity.
I know a lot of Hank Williams fans were like really skeptical about this. And the biggest thing is the singing. And you open the movie with him singing, but no, he pulled it off.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll tell you what, that's exactly why I opened the movie that way, from the day I wrote it. Because a lot of people don't know who Hank Williams really is. They know his name, but they don't know his music. And I really wanted people to hear the poetry. Because he's a brilliant writer. I mean, it's 3 chords and a tier in the country music. It's not, I can play the chords, G is C and an E or whatever, an A and E, But I wanted to just take it out of time, take it out of place, take it out of these guys looking like hee-haw with big things on and show people. And Hank Williams never sang a cappella in his life. There's not one recording. So I immediately wanted to say, this is not, and people, will have opinions about it and be mad at me about it. But the fact is I started like that for that very reason. I wanted to say, you know what? It's not what you think it's going to be. And please listen to a man who can say, you know, in anger unkind words are said that make the teardrops start. How can I free your doubtful mind and melt your cold, cold heart? I mean, yeah, that's real writing.
It's beautiful writing, and I think I was the opposite in that I didn't really know Hank Williams, but I knew his songs.
Yeah.
I just didn't know they were all from the same person.
I know a lot of young people don't know that. You know, that's a fact. The gentleman asked about with Rodney Crowell, the guy that trained Tom. Did he help pick out any of the music besides coaching Tom? No. For the most part. I mean, because you're so close with somebody. Of course, I showed them and said, no, I'm really proud of that soundtrack, or like that sound. I should say proud. I like that soundtrack a lot because there's some eclectic stuff on it. One of my favorite songs of all time is Tennessee Waltz, and the last movie I directed, and it's in here too. Joe Stafford singing Tennessee Waltz in the radio station. That's source music. No, I picked out the only song that Rodney kind of leaned. I had a different song in the second party scene, Jimmy Liggins. That's what's knocking me out. And Rodney was all, man, you got to put in Jimmy Liggins. Put in Jimmy Liggins. Now, nobody knows it's Jimmy Liggins, but Rodney really pressed me up on Jimmy Liggins. So, and I don't know if y'all noticed this because but I bet you haven't seen 10 movies in your life that don't. There's no score in this movie.
Really? I didn't even
Score.
realize that.
Think of all those scenes. Think of that long scene when he's standing. He goes back to the farm to get Audrey, and he's behind the gate, and he works his way. There's no music, just crickets. And when you hear, and when he tells her, when she says, "I'm pregnant," there's no music. There's no score. The only music besides the source music in the car or something like that is the little ditties that I put underneath the Super 8 footage. There's no score. And there's, seriously, I've probably not 10 movies since 1970 that have any. Because every time, the actors were so good, I just said, every time I heard the score, I said, what am I trying to tell the audience they should feel? Hopefully, I felt it. Maybe, hopefully you guys did. Yeah, well, that's the old school.
And there is a soundtrack, correct?
Yes, it's released today, I think.
Oh, really?
On Sony Legacy. They do it all digitally now, But yeah, the soundtrack's out. It's got Delmore Brothers. It's got Santa Baby. It's got Tennessee Waltz. It's got Tom singing 4 or 5 songs on it.
Tom Hiddleston in a variety of things, including Shakespeare, of course, Hanging Upside Down. And I know that he had to rehearse very hard, but has he ever sung professionally before?
No. I love that you saw him. You saw him at the Donmar. Yeah, oh yeah. He played Corey Lance, one of the most demanding parts in Shakespeare. I mean, he's classically trained, obviously. Tom is a consummate performer. As I like to say, he's got a lot of pork in him, but he's never sung professionally. I mean, it wouldn't take him much if he was here right now. He wouldn't be shy about singing. He loves to sing, and during the in between takes on some of our big scenes, he would just sit there with the guitar and entertain the audience. Play the whole repertoire. But no, he's not a professional singer. He really did have to train, and he's a natural baritone. Hank's a tenor. So that's why I said you can't get there. Rodney kept saying, look, because he's a stage actor, he also projects so much, and that's not what Hank did. He said he had to teach Tom how to sing from the neck up and not from the belly up.
The scene at the beginning when he got knocked over the bar, was that like the trigger of the rest of the back thing?
No, good question though. No, it wasn't. He had spina bifida occulta, which is basically when your spine doesn't fuse. And nowadays, if any of us knew anyone who had that, they'd fix that like that, But in those days, they weren't even sure about it. He came from very poor family, his dad was gone since he was 5 years old, and they never knew what it was and didn't fix it. And what it was a continuing source of pain. So he was always in a certain sort of pain. It's why he couldn't, how when we see Elvis, the way Elvis shakes it, and the way Tom does Hank is just sort of the knees. That's why his movement that people used to say is kind of snake-like kind of came from the fact that he couldn't really do the Elvis thing. And he had spina bifida. And of course, it comes later in the movie where the doctor says you have this, and we can alleviate it. We can't make it go away, but it was just another situation that caused his back to hurt.
And I'm curious, what's up next for you? I always feel bad asking filmmakers that because it's like they just birthed a baby. But I want to see what you're doing next.
Well, yeah, like anybody who's, I just want to be doing something. I'm working on something I wrote that's far astray from this. That's an action thriller.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's very character-based because I love actors and trying to build real characters. To me, that's what the movies that I'm most inspired by. You know, somebody said to me, my agents were saying to me, we were just having some goofy conversation, and they were talking about all these, superhero movies, and they said, come on, because I'm so cantankerous about that stuff. And I don't knock them. I mean, I was telling you that Zack Snyder directed Superman, or Superman versus Batman, and the first movie he ever directed, I was a producer on, hired him. But they said, well, if somebody offered you a ton of money and said you could do a big Marvel movie, you'd do it. I said, no, I wouldn't. I would not do that. And they said, why? I said, first of all, I know I was dealing with idiots. Because I'd be the worst guy to do it, because all that CG, and I mean, that's really something I'm just not. I've made movies with filmmakers who can do that, but I'm not one of those guys. Mm-hmm. But this is this is a character action thriller. Takes place in another country, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
I hope that, that's what I want to do next.
I can't wait to see what you do next. And
Thank
again,
you.
Congratulations on a great movie. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys so much, really. Thank you for coming.